Dave Ramsey personality George Kamel a little over a year ago today released a video titled IUL Explained that I found incredibly and almost embarrassingly uninformed and misleading. Today we're going to take a look at that.
Let's start by defining index universal life insurance. Gosh, that is a mouthful. I hate it based on that name alone.
I first need to say, looking at this video and watching through it, I was truly shocked. There was not many sentences in this video that were informed, correct, or accurate at all. I know Dave Ramsey tends to make a lot of blanket statements that help a lot of people and are good for a lot of people, but this one was concerning. Now, I will say, though, for the record, I am, in general, a large fan of Dave Ramsey. He's done a ton for a ton of people. I think he's fantastic for 90+% of people, especially when it comes to starting out in finance, keeping things simple. I'm sure he's made record numbers of how many millionaires or whatever just from following his baby steps. I actually at one point was interviewing for his company before I ended up taking another role, but lots of respect for him. I think he does an incredible job for a lot of people, but sometimes the blanket statements are out of hand, and in this case, not him, but his personality, I think was really concerning and needed to be addressed. So let's go ahead and get into it. Okay, we're going to keep this really simple. I'm just going to go down quote by quote. His main talking points were what it is, how it works, and whether it's a smart move. First one, he says it's where you have an investment account and a life insurance policy rolled into one product. I'll let him get away with a little bit here, but although already saying that you have an investment account is a little concerning, he makes the error that this one is kind of alluding towards later, so I'll save it. Next, he says, never recommend.
Because it tries to do two things at once and ends up sucking at both.
Well, if you're max funding an indexed universal life insurance policy, I hope you're not really doing it for the insurance and you're doing it for the tax-free benefits and the tax-free income and to increase your net spendable income. You don't really try to kill two birds with one stone. There's tons of people who do try to do this. In those cases, I would side with George and say that that's an error and you shouldn't use this for your life insurance and your retirement account or whatever. Now these next two, he commits a bit of a mortal sin with both of them and says,
with IUL, you're specifically investing into index funds.
Shortly after says a chunk of your monthly premium gets invested into index funds. No money is going into an index fund. It is being linked to an index fund. So what happens when you put money into an index universal life policy is this. We're gonna assume you're max funding it and you're structuring it correctly. A portion of that money goes towards the cost of insurance. The rest of that money goes into a general account portfolio. Let's say it's $1 million. The general account portfolio is paying, let's say 4%, $40,000. What the insurance company then does is with that $40,000, instead of just giving it back to you, what they're doing is they're going to buy upside options. What that means is if all of those options completely fail and they go down, worst case, you lose the $40,000 and you still have the $1 million. Of course, there's some little fees that might come out, but you still have the $1 million. Now, if the market does well and goes up, let's say that index fund does 10% and you had a cap of 10 and a floor of 0, well, then you get credited 10%. So when the market goes up, you're going to get credited whatever it does up to a cap. If the market goes down, there's a floor. You don't really go below that. The reason that's possible is because they're using the money from the general account portfolio to invest into upside options to serve as a vehicle to grow your money to use as retirement income. Simple as that. No money is going into the index fund. No money is going into the market. If you want it in the market, there is variable universal life. That is different than index universal life. Next, he does not stop there. He says your ROI will always be slightly below the actual performance of the index. Why? Because the commissions and fees your agent makes by selling this crap are insane. That's right out of your investment account. Again, here with the investment account, there's no money that's going into the market. It's being linked to the market. He goes on to talk about the commissions and fees your agent makes by selling this crap are ridiculously high. Now, what's funny is he says instead of putting money with he always says investing, which is not investing, putting money with an insurance agent and max funding a contract, for example, is ridiculous. You should also go with a financial advisor instead. If a financial advisor charges 1.5% as their fee and they get that every year forever, maybe 20 years, for example, is that actually more expensive than an insurance agent who makes maybe 6%? Typically that's high too. A lot of the times it's going to be a little bit less than that if it's structured properly. I don't think so. So in this case, you have the 1.5% forever from the financial advisor as your money continues to grow, and he's taking 1% of that every year for the rest of your life, or you have 6% one time upfront. He does not stop there. He says, and as you get older, the cost to insure you can start wiping out your entire premium every month, meaning you have nothing going towards the investment side of your policy. The insurance company will even start dipping into your investment account to cover the cost of your premium. This would have to be a miserably structured policy by an agent who has no idea what they're talking about for this to actually happen. Now, if you structure it properly and have the least amount of insurance for the most amount of cash value, you really cut down the agent's commissions, which you're supposed to do. That's where you get the 6% from, not the 20 or 30% that some might get if it's not the minimum amount of insurance. What happens is, yes, as you get older, of course, the cost per 1,000 of insurance goes up. The thing is, because you start with, let's say, 500,000 of insurance, and your cash value is growing and getting closer to that 500,000, the amount of insurance you're paying for goes down. So the total cost that you're paying for the sum of insurance goes down because you're paying for less insurance. So if you do this properly, it's totally wrong and uninformed when they say, oh, insurance gets more expensive as you get older and it's going to destroy your policy, and then eventually all of your premiums are going to go into paying that insurance and they're going to go into your investment account. Who structured this policy? Anyway, enough with that one. Next one, he says, and if you want to use any of your money, you have to borrow your own money and pay it back with interest. Your own money, he says. Yes, you do access your money via policy loans. That's at least typically the smartest way to do that for tax-free income. Also, George should know that you can withdraw everything that you put in taxed FIFO, first in, first out, tax-free, because all that money that you put in was tax-free. So that's the first thing you can do. Now, I wouldn't necessarily recommend doing that, but you could. All of the growth, you would, yes, loan it out for a tax-free policy loan. However, he also notes here that you have to pay that back with interest. Yes, it is gaining interest. No, you don't have to pay it back. Yes, it's also gaining interest while it's still linked to the index, and maybe you're paying 5% for it, but if the index averages 8, you get a 3% spread on money you've already spent, and no, you do not have to pay it back. It just subtracts from your death benefit that would pass to your heirs. Again, very clear misunderstanding here. It doesn't stop there. And next he says your family only gets the original amount the policy was worth.
In other words, if you bought a $250,000 policy but ended up with an additional $180,000 in your investment account, your family still only gets $250,000 if you die.
This is quite concerning. So if you have, let's say, a $1 million policy, which, by the way, you never just get like $1 million policy or a $500,000 policy. What you do is say, here's how much money I want to put in, what's the least amount of insurance, and it's usually a number like $1.23 million and $465. It's usually completely random. So let's say you want to put in $500,000 and you're 60, you're healthy, and they say, okay, you need $1.2 million of insurance, and that's the starting number. That's the starting amount of insurance, and it's staying level. You put in the $500,000 over 5 years, that's continuing to grow. Yes, your 1.2 million stays the same, but as you get to the point where you hit the corridor of the minimum amount of insurance you have to have and your money starts to grow beyond the 1.2 million, well, what happens is that 1.2 million goes up with your cash value, staying at least 5% above so that it's still considered insurance and you get the tax-free benefits, and then that number is continuing to grow. You wouldn't want the entire thing to be paid out in the 250 plus the 180, because if you had $250,000 policy and $180,000 growth, what that would say is even as that $180,000 is growing, so is the $250,000, meaning you're still paying for $250,000 of insurance. You want to pay for less insurance as it gets older, so it's cheaper, and again, you're using this for the tax-free income, tax-free growth, not for the insurance. You can use term insurance to do that if you need to. This is just for the tax-free growth. If you don't want the insurance, Doug Andrew always says, make him the beneficiary. It's not for the insurance, you're doing it for the growth. And he finishes here with one last quote, term life is the only type of life insurance that does not rip you off. Depends what your goals are. If you're trying to use universal life, for example, as a vehicle to grow your money tax-free, I would not exactly consider that a rip-off. If you're using it in terms of the amount of insurance that you want to get, well, then maybe go with term for what the goal that you're trying to accomplish is. But in this case, of course, that's not what you would be trying to do. Overall, hopefully this video was helpful. If you did see that video from George Kamel, again, I understand what they're trying to say. They're trying to protect people who want to put in $300 a month and make a commitment and they end up not doing that and they get screwed over. Yes, if you're that kind of person, go with their kind of advice. Don't try to get complex when you can't save money to begin with. But if you are someone who has more money and you're looking to plan for retirement and has a decent nest egg, well, this can be a very powerful vehicle. I just think a lot of their comments are blanket statements. And these weren't even blanket statements. Some of these were just flat out wrong, felt unnecessary, and hopefully this was helpful and cleared some things up. So any follow-up questions, anything like that in the comments, leave those down below. Always happy to answer, and we will see you guys in the next video. Subscribe.